Good morning and welcome. If you're just joining us, just wanted to turn your attention momentarily to our intro slide with a few important bits of information that you may find helpful for your webinar experience today. If you haven't yet done so, we'd like to invite you to download the slides that we have available on our event page. If you scroll down to the bottom of the event page, you'll find them under the event materials section. Additionally, should you need tech support rather than typing in the chat pod, we request that should you need tech support, please send us a tech support email request at millfamellen@gmail.com. This is the easiest and most expedient way for us to assist you with anything you may need on the technical side of things. And then finally, as some of y'all have already done, thank you so much for saying hello. We hope that you do join us in the chat pod for introductions, hellos, questions, and comments throughout today's session. So if you can't find the chat pod or you haven't seen it yet, simply scroll your cursor over the slides that we're sharing. You should see a toolbar pop up across the bottom of your screen. And then about in the middle, you should see a chat bubble icon. And then if you click on that, it should pop it out to the side. If you need anything else, just let us know. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll get started here right in about 10 minutes at the top of the hour. Good morning and welcome. Just wanted to say hello and thank you all so much for joining us today. We still have a few minutes before we get started here at the top of the hour. However, if you want to take the next few minutes before we get started to first off download the slides that we have available for you on our event page, you can print those out and they're very helpful for taking notes as we go through. Additionally, also note if you need tech support, please note down our MFLN email address should you need to shoot us a tech support request via email throughout today's session. We hope that you don't, of course, need to access that, but we are available here for you if you need the assistance. Finally, we do invite you to join us, as many of you have already done, in the chat pod for conversation, questions, as well as hellos. It's just so nice to get to know you all a little bit better here in this virtual environment, as well as be able to field and respond to all of your questions and pertinent comments. So thanks again for taking the time to join us. Like I said, we'll get started here in a couple minutes, but don't hesitate to let us know should you need anything in the interim. Good morning and welcome. My name is Coral Owen. I'm the Professional Development Coordinator for the Military Families Learning Network. It's my sincere pleasure to once again welcome you to today's webinar. Today's session is on inclusion of young children with autism, and it's hosted by the MFLN Family Development Early Intervention Concentration Area. In case you're joining us for the first time, I'd like to give you a brief tour of our webinar platform here in Zoom so you can find your way around and have a great experience today. Hopefully you're currently able to view the slides that we're sharing. If you're unable to see them or having any other difficulties, please shoot us an email tech support request at milfamln@gmail.com. As some of you have already done, we do look forward to having you join us in the chat pod for conversation, questions, and hellos. To embed the chat pod so you don't miss any links or conversations, simply place your cursor over the shared slides. You'll then see a toolbar pop up across the bottom of your screen, and then from there you can click the chat bubble icon that should be about in the middle. Also, please note when typing questions and comments in the chat pod to select that all panelists and attendees response option from the drop-down menu right above where it says type message here. This is just so that everyone is able to view them in the chat pod and better understand the questions and conversation that's coming through. We'll also be covering evaluation and continuing education information at the end of today's session. The Military Families Learning Network is part of a DoD-USDA partnership for military families, and our passion is to connect military family service providers and cooperative extension professionals to research and to each other through innovative online programming. I'll now turn things over to my colleague, Robin DiPietro-Wells, who's the program coordinator with the MFLN Early Intervention Team, to introduce today's presenters. Robin?
Good morning. My name is Robin DiPietro-Wells, and I am the program coordinator, as Coral said, for the early intervention team with the MFLN. Our goal here is to help support and enhance the skills of professionals serving military families who have young children with developmental delays and/or disabilities. Today, we have again with us for our last webinar this year, Dr. Hedda Maidan, and also new to us here at MFLN is Dr. Mandy Rispoli. Dr. Maydon is a professor in the Department of Special Education at the University of Illinois, a Gold Stick Family Scholar, and a board-certified behavior analyst. Her areas of interest include social communication skills and challenging behavior of individuals with autism and other developmental disabilities, and intervention methods to enhance these spheres of functioning. Dr. Rispoli is a professor of special education in the Department of Educational Studies at Purdue University and the co-director of the Purdue Autism Cluster. Dr. Rispoli is also a board-certified behavior analyst at the doctoral level. Her research focuses on functional behavior assessment and function-based intervention for challenging behavior in children with autism and developmental disabilities. Before I turn things over to Dr. Maydon, please listen closely. If you are a BCBA, a Board Certified Behavior Analyst, here today seeking continuing education credit from the Behavior Analyst Credential Board, please verify your attendance by typing your name in the chat box at this time. Again, only if you are a BCBA, please verify your attendance by typing your name in the chat box at this time. This is how we are able to verify live attendance in the session for BCBAs in order to ensure that you can get your CE credits from BACB. Again, we'll cover at the end specifically how to do that, but we do need you to go ahead and type your name in the chat box if you're a BCBA here for BACB credits. So at this point, I'm going to mute my microphone and turn it over to Dr. Maydon to begin the presentation.
Well, good morning, everyone, or almost good afternoon for some of you. Thank you very much for joining us today. As Robin mentioned, this is the fourth and last webinar in the series of autism. You can access the previous webinar we've done on the MFLN website. We'll talk about autism, a disorder that impacts more than 70 million individuals around the world. We'll start with a very, very brief introduction to autism and what it is, and then we'll start talking about inclusion in general. We really hope this will be an interactive webinar, so please use the chat to write comments, ideas, questions, any thought you have. Mandy and I, and with the help of Robin, will kind of look at all the questions and try to respond to them as soon as we can. So please use that to kind of make it more interactive. If you are listening to the recording of the webinar, we're glad you found us, and please feel free to stop, reflect on what you've done, because you will not be able to participate in a discussion and kind of look at the discussion that is included. Robin also mentioned that both Mandy and I are board certified behavior analysts. So we just want to clarify that the strategy and the recommendation and practices that we're going to discuss today are primarily coming from the behavioral perspective. So this is that's kind of the view that we're looking at things, and that's most of the thing we're going to discuss today. So for the objective of today, first we're going to define what inclusion is and how it looks like. And we'll talk about the characteristic of inclusion, specifically access, participation, and support. We'll talk about the benefits of including children with disability, autism specifically, and other developmental disorders in childcare and preschool setting. Benefits that are not just for the kids themselves, but other people who are in that setting. And we're also going to discuss recommendation and practices that how we can modify both the social and the physical environment to support the inclusion of young children with autism and other developmental disability. So this is our objective for today, and we'll start with as I mentioned, a very brief introduction to autism. So maybe we'll start by, some of you I know were participating in the other webinars we've done, but if you can write something in the chat about what it is autism to you. What do you know about it? What do you think about it? Any thoughts that come to your mind when you think about the word or the term autism? Yeah, neurodiversity. Thank you. And I think you just need to remember to, when you write something, don't just use all panelists, use all panelists and attendees. So this way everyone can see your response and it's not just us here on the other side. So I'm just going to read some of you mention impact communication and social skills, sensory complication, neurodiversity. Again, try to write something for the not just all panelists, but also for everyone who are attending. You just need to change the people who the message is going to. A group of behavior that interfere with the functioning of the child, neurodevelopmental spectrum, sensory, developmental delays, unique perspective or understanding, navigating of the world, difficulty communication. So I'm sure all of you heard about the term autism, but if we have done this webinar a few years ago, probably not everyone knew about autism, but now it's in the news, it's on TV, it's on shows, it's on movies. So it's something that many people know about, and of course it become more frequently used in many different places, so more people know. But everything you said is exactly what describe autism. So let's start with kind of, again, just a very, very quick overview. So autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder, which means it impacts the central nervous system and could impact the function of the child in many different domains. It's important to remember it's a spectrum, which means every child is different. And as people say, when you met one child with autism, you met one child with autism. Same thing about families. When you met one family with a child with autism, you met one family with a child with autism. It's very diverse. The abilities, skills, and needs are very different across different kids. Um, Before 2013, there were a few categories within autism, autistic disorder, PDD-NOS, Asperger syndrome. But since the new DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorder, they decided to put everything under one umbrella. So currently, we're only talking about autism as one category. We don't divide it into subcategories. So this is something kind of recently new, but it's something that kind of when we look in the past, we're looking at different kids with different diagnoses, and now everyone will get this very similar diagnosis of autism. The prevalence of autism. So we don't know exactly how many kids have autism, but we have some estimation. So the first thing is that autism occurs in all racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic groups. There's some research that show differences across different groups, but researchers still trying to figure out is the differences because the way we diagnose kids or because there are really differences. But we see it across all groups and everywhere in the world. Again, the estimation. So the most common estimation is from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC. It's from 2014, and they talk about 1 in every 59 kids have autism. It's based on children who were 8 years old in 2014 from 11 states. A more recent estimate is from 2016. It's from the National Survey of Children Health, and they talking about 1 in every 40 children has autism. This is based on parents' reports of kids between the age of 3 and 17. Um, when we talk about military family, we have even fewer estimates and maybe older one too. So we have from 2005, the estimation, we're talking about 1 in 88 children in active duty military member have autism. At the same time, the CDC was talking about 1 in 110. So it's possibly this number increased, obviously. A more recent data we have from the TRICARE data is from 2011, and they are talking about 20,000 military dependents who have autism. So again, the numbers are increasing, and we see the prevalence are increasing every year. And we probably will see some more changes. Related to the gender, we have the information we have is that there are 4 times more boys than girls. There are more research done on this area, and some people say again, maybe it's related to the way we diagnose kids and not because girls have, don't have autism as much as kids as boys. So this is again was very, very brief introduction to autism. And now that we kind of did this short introduction, we'll move on to our topic of today, which is inclusion of young kids with autism. And we want to start with what is inclusion. So again, if you can use the chat room to say what do you think inclusion is, what's your experience with inclusion, and I'm going to move. I'll give Mandy the control, and she will start this discussion.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So when you think of the word inclusion, what does this mean to you? If you'll go ahead and type that into the chat window. And again, if you can select all panelists and all attendees, that way we can all see your responses. Great. So inclusion is not leaving children or family left out. Awesome. Families are involved. Great. Includes everyone. Inclusion is getting students' needs met in general education settings. So in other words, settings where children would be if they did not have a disability, or learning supports, awesome. Open to all, creating an environment where people can participate collaboratively, everyone matters, opportunities to participate. I see a lot of participation and supports and equality coming through your posts, great, and equal opportunity. Effective learning environments, excellent. So to echo what you all have already mentioned, inclusion is not just the opposite of exclusion. So having people left out doesn't necessarily mean that bringing them in is inclusion, right? So inclusion is more than just than the opposite of exclusion. Inclusion is also more than a set of strategies or than a location. When I worked in the schools, I would often ask where a student was headed in the hallway, and they would say, oh, he's going to inclusion, as if inclusion was a destination. So inclusion is not about a location. It's about being a member of a community. It's about having friends, belonging to a school, belonging to a neighborhood. And so to echo what you all were posting, inclusion is really where all members feel valued, feel that they are members, and feel connected. So over the years, we've had a lot of different approaches towards supporting all learners. So we used to have a pretty heavily exclusion model in our school system. And so we still have a lot of exclusionary practices. So exclusion is the removal from an educational setting. So sometimes this can be short-term, like suspension from school, but this exclusion can also be long-term in the terms of expulsion. So sometimes families might hear, this isn't the best place for your child. For example, we know that preschool age children are at a much greater risk of suspension and expulsion than children in the kindergarten through 12th grades. In some cases, childcare centers and schools may not feel that they have the resources or the expertise to support learners with diverse needs. And so out of good intentions, children with disabilities may be excluded. In other cases, we see separation. And so this is where children with disabilities like autism are taught within the same center or the same school, but in a segregated or what we sometimes refer to as self-contained setting. So this separation for typically developing peers, it's separation from the general education curriculum, so what the other children are learning. And we know that this separation reduces opportunities for kids with disabilities to access peer models so that they can learn appropriate social and communication skills. And it reduces their access to the curriculum. So we're widening the gap between what children with and without disabilities are learning. Integration reflects situations in which children with disabilities are included in a general education environment, but they're grouped by ability level or by disability. So this actually continues to perpetuate that sense of otherness and those barriers. So we can have integrated classrooms that are not inclusive classrooms. Inclusion, on the other hand, is when children with varying characteristics and abilities are learning together in one learning environment. Inclusion is dynamic, it's always changing, and it's fluid because we're constantly altering the environment to meet the needs of all learners. We know that inclusion offers a lot of benefits too. So inclusion improves learning and developmental outcomes for young children. We know that inclusion can benefit families and children without disabilities. And inclusion allows high expectations to be set for every child so that every child can reach his or her full potential. In terms of benefits of inclusion, we think, of course, of the benefits to the child with autism or with other disabilities, such as larger developmental and learning gains when they are educated in an inclusive environment, greater cognitive and communication development, stronger social emotional skills and friendships, larger groups of friends, better social competence. Children's growth and learning is related to their peer skills, and lifelong inclusion produces better school outcomes for children with disabilities. But we also know that inclusion can support typically developing children or those children who do not have disabilities in terms of developing positive social and attitudinal outcomes, greater compassion and empathy for diversity and for others, and more positive perceptions of children with disabilities, especially when the teachers in the classroom support such interactions. We also know that this individualized learning that is characteristic of inclusion really means that all learners are getting individualized learning opportunities. So it's helping to meet the needs of all students in the classroom. We know that families can benefit as well by having larger support networks, developing friendships and community inclusion opportunities. Teachers benefit by learning new ways to support students with a variety of needs and abilities. And we know that school is preparation for life in society. And so inclusive schools will lead to inclusive communities. I want to introduce you all to an organization that has a lot of resources for providers as well as for families. And this is called the Division for Early Childhood. This is a subdivision of the Council for Exceptional Children, which is one of the largest professional organizations for special education. The Division for Early Childhood focuses on infants, toddlers, and young children from age birth to 8 years with or at risk for disability. And the focus of this organization is really on advocacy for those families and those children, as well as dissemination of evidence-based recommended practices. One of the things that the Division for Early Childhood has developed is a set of 8 areas of recommended practices. These practices are designed to help bridge that gap from what we know in research to what we do in our practice. And these practices are grouped into 8 different strands, which you can see here: leadership, assessment, environment, family, instruction, interaction, teaming and collaboration, and transition. What you may notice is that there's not a strand for inclusion. And that's because inclusion really is at the heart of all of the practices within the Division for Early Childhood. You can go to the Division for Early Childhood's website here, and you have the link at the bottom of the screen. And on this website, they have the recommended practices that are freely available for you in a variety of formats. One of the newest aspects of the recommended practices are call-out areas where you can not only see the practice, but you also get to see examples of what that practice might look like in a center, a school, or another childcare facility. So these provide definitions of the practices and then examples to think about how you might be able to incorporate these into your own professional work. So this is a great resource that I hope you will take advantage of because it is free. In addition, DEC and the National Association for the Education of Young Children came together in 2009 to write a joint statement, a position statement on early childhood inclusion. And in this statement, they provide a definition of inclusion, they specify the intended results or outcomes of inclusion, and they specify 3 defining features of inclusion. And today we're going to focus on these 3 defining features, which are access, participation, and supports. So in their definition of inclusion, they talk about early inclusion providing access to the right of every infant and young child and their family to participate in a variety of activities. They talk about results being a sense of belonging, of membership, positive social relationships and friendships, and of course, every child reaching their full potential. So for the remainder of our time today, we'll be talking about these 3 defining features of access, participation, and supports, and how they can lead to these desired results. But before we jump in, I want to take a moment and talk about what are some of the barriers or challenges that you have either experienced or anticipate experiencing with respect to including children with autism in inclusive environments. So go ahead and in the chat window, if you could just speak briefly about what are some challenges or some barriers that you think may impact inclusion for children with autism. Great, so I'm seeing some responses popping in. This looks like not knowing how to help, maybe few resources in terms of staff or teachers in the classroom, difficult behaviors that present some challenges for the learning environment, misunderstanding, lack of knowledge of autism. So in early childhood, of course, with autism specifically, we're talking about diagnosis of children with autism. And so because it is a developmental disability, we're looking at different patterns of development, which means that as children are going through those early childhood years, many are receiving diagnoses. So thinking about how to support families during that time and during that really difficult transition for some. Fear, parents, so parent reactions to diagnosis as well. So there's a lot here, not only about supporting the child, but also about supporting the family, and then thinking about what resources are available to provide those supports for child and for family. Excellent. So as we move forward, if you could think about these barriers and then think about the supports that we're showing you in terms of access, participation, and supports, and consider how these may address some of the barriers that you've identified. And at this time, I'm going to pass it back to Hedda to talk about our first area of support, which is access.
Yeah, thank you, Mandy. So many barriers and challenges were mentioned, and as Mandy mentioned, the kind of defining feature of quality and effective inclusion is access, participation, and support. So we going to talk about different practices and strategy we can use related to each one of these areas or defining characteristic in order to make inclusion positive and effective for kids and families. So the first one is access, the first kind of feature of inclusion effective, providing access to a wide range of learning opportunities, activities, setting, and environment is a defining feature of high quality early childhood education. And Mandy mentioned before that inclusion is not just a place. So just having a child with a disability or a child with autism in a childcare center or a home center is not enough to make sure that the child is included and being part of a member of the group. So we need to really intentionally plan and program to make sure that the child will have an access. And sometimes small modification and changes could make a big difference on the inclusion of all kids. A term that we're going to talk about next is universal design for learning. And the idea behind universal design for learning is that when we plan a classroom, when we plan an activity, we try to make sure that it will provide access to all the kids in the classroom. We don't think about one child, but we think about how can this be appropriate for every child and every family that is part of that specific setting. When we do that, we'll need to do fewer modification and changes in order to make everyone has an access. Of course, we'll continue to do individualized modification, individual adjustment for the environment, for the curriculum, for whatever we do with the kids, because these kids have individualized plan or program or family support service. So we really need to think about how we try intentionally before the first day of school, before the first day of the daycare beginning, is how we plan everything to make sure everyone has access. And after we have the access, then we can make some more modification to make sure everyone can access everything. Again, universal design for learning, a term that I'm sure many of you have heard about, is designing early education settings so all children, as equal and value member of the program, can access and engage in own learning opportunity, learn from common curriculum according to their individual strength and ability, and demonstrate their learning in multiple ways. So again, the idea is that every child will have access, and we make changes, it could probably be appropriate for every kids, and can increase access to all the kids in the classroom. And I'm sure Courtney is putting some links to different reading. We also have in a resource uh, page that we have some reading about that, but you can read more about universal design for learning and how can we do it specifically for early childhood center. So let's look at some specific activities. So when we think about universal design for learning, we're thinking about three different kind of categories. One, we want to give different options for learning. Second, we want to increase the choices for engagement. And also we want to make more choices for demonstrating learning. So some example, option for how a child learns. So some kid will like to sit on a chair. Some kids will like to sit on a carpet. Some kids will like to lay on the floor when they're learning. So we really need to give these options so kids can learn in different ways. When you think about engagement, we want to make sure that the kids have motivation for learning and kind of working toward their interest. So we want to have many different materials, different texture, different activity that's going on, so kids can engage with the topic of the day or the material we're talking about in many different ways. We also want to give them different options to demonstrate their learning. So they can build a tower, they can draw a picture, they can sing, they can work with a group, they can work by themselves. So again, thinking about different ways we can have the child learn, engage, and demonstrate their learning. And being flexible with all of that. So I know you all have a lot of experience. So next we want to see, maybe you have some ideas that we can use for UDL. So what one idea you have for using UDL to support inclusion of young children with autism? Think about thing you did, you observed, kind of small ideas that we can use in order to increase the access of the kids and using universal design for learning. So someone just said the mom told me today that her child had to stand up in preschool in order to attend. So was this the child choice? Or is some kids prefer to stand up and learn, some kids prefer to lay down? As long as we are flexible and kind of based on the child's ability, that could work. Providing range of assisted tool to promote opportunity. We also need to remember the use of technology. We all use technology now, and we can use technology in the classroom to both help with learning, but also help the kids engage and also demonstrate their learning. Encouraging open-ended materials like a Play-Doh, sensory table, again, different texture, different way the kids can engage with the different things we're talking about. Model for other how to play, a choice board, picture board. You mentioned many of the things we're going to talk about more specifically in a few minutes. AAC device or signs, so different modes of communication. So many times we're thinking about verbal communication, but there's so many other modes of communication kids can engage in learning and also demonstrate their learning. So think about different modes of communication where AAC is one of them. Sign language, multiple sitting option, thinking about circle time and sticky mat, carpet, chair. These are many different ways that kids can, and it doesn't have to be just for kids with disability or just for kids with autism. We can give the options because every child is unique and learn in different way. I see centers with less children invited. We'll talk in a second actually about how we arrange the physical and social environment. So these are all kind of, the idea again from UDL is not that we're making change based on the kids we have in the classroom. We're intentionally thinking about how can we support flexible learning, and then we offer that to all the kids in the classroom, and then we can make some more specific individualization based on the kids' needs. Yeah, and someone just mentioned inclusion of all families, which is also something we'll talk about, but it's very important. It's when we talk about inclusion, we're not talking only about inclusion of the kids, we're talking about inclusion of the family as a whole. So again, we're talking still about access. We mentioned UDL, but there's a way to arrange the physical environment, and we'll talk in a second about the social environment that can really help children to have access to the learning. When we think about physical environment, we think about attention. So how can we help them have the attention and concentration to work on what they're doing? We want to make sure that we give them access through communication, the way we're doing it, both using different modes of communication, but also allowing them to demonstrate or communicate in different modes, and of course, increasing motivation. So in the picture that you see here, on the one on the right, you can see on the floor, there's some drawing of where the kids are working, if it's a sand or if it's water, whatever the activity is. This way, the child knows where they need to be. They have some kind of boundaries. Some kids with autism like to have some boundaries. They know where to be. But it's allowed for both parallel play or even interactive play, but each child has his own or their own space to work on. We can think about the activity we're using, what the physical play, how we arrange the environment, which center is next to each other. Some kids like quiet time, so maybe we shouldn't put block center next to a book center. Maybe we can put them further apart from each other, so kids who want some quiet time will have that quiet time in the book. So really think about the physical environment. To promote communication, we can think about different way of putting things inside of or and out of reach. So kids will want something, but will need to request for it. So this increase communication. And we also want to think about who is being in which center. So on the left side, you can see there's specific 4 places for kids who can be in the housekeeping center. So one of you mentioned before, we want to limit the number of people in the center, so it will allow kids some independent, but also some parallel or interactive play. So thinking how we can arrange the environment to make sure that everyone has a place to be in, know what they need to do, but also kind of explore the motivation. So when we think about the physical environment, again, we think about attention, communication, and motivation. Visual support is something we use very frequently with kids with autism, but when you think about it, we all use visual support as adults even. So this is something that could be beneficial for all the kids in the classroom, not just the kids with autism. We see here an example of the schedule. We see task analysis, so what we need to do in a specific task, and also seeing what's coming next. So again, thinking about universal design perspective, planning all of these visual before the first day of school, the first day of home environment, and then allowing everyone in the classroom, all the kids and adults, to use this visual support. But then we can do some adaptation based on specific kids' needs. Another type of support, visual support, which is a little bit different than what we usually use, is helping kids play using some visual support. So we're going to watch a video now. It's about 1 minute and 15 seconds long. We're going to see a teacher in a preschool classroom. The child has autism, and she used some visual support to help him play. And you can see the other kids are playing around him. He's involved, but he also has some structure for his play that can help him promote, and again, providing access to the activity the other kids are having. So I'm going to start the video. Again, if you're watching the recorded webinar, please feel free to stop here, rewind, watch it again, have some reflection of what you've seen. And in the chat, all of you, please just kind of comment what you see, what you think about it. Have you used it before? And then we'll start now.
And since we're already using visual supports to give him some options for activities, I thought maybe also offering him some visual supports for the actual building process would be helpful.
I think you're exactly right. All right, can you put them on here? Right on top of there. Very you go.
At one of the team meetings, we actually talked through my idea of just making him some little maps that would facilitate his building. And so the teacher and I had talked about this and agreed that maybe this was a good idea to try. So I went ahead and made the maps of things that he already had choices for on his visual supports for actually choosing something to build, and I was trying to be congruent with that. And so then the next thing I wanted to do was actually go ahead and take that into the classroom and try it with him. And let the teacher observe a little bit, if she could, just so that we could then evaluate whether this was an intervention that was really going to be helpful to him or not, and if we needed to adapt it.
Any thoughts? Is it something unique you've seen? Something you want to add to that? Please just write that in the chat so we can kind of share. But this is a different way of thinking about visual support to increase access for kids. And this way the child was able to play next to other kids, maybe share some of the blocks, but also participate in the activity that was going on in the classroom. Yeah, someone just mentioned that the teacher is really great in instruction, promoting positive behavior, visual support. Yeah, he allows him to work with other kids. Thank you. Help child structure play. Some kids with autism need the structure to play. They have some more difficulty with spontaneous play. So this really helps the child again to explore his play, see other kids, play next to other, and promote learning, of course. Thank you for your comments. Oops. So we talk about the physical environment, how we kind of arranging the physical environment to increase access, but we also need to think about the social environment and really think about who's in the classroom and how we structure the social environment to promote access, to promote inclusion of all the kids, and make sure that everyone has all the abilities and characteristics of all the kids in the setting are considered. So arranging this, the social environments include the grouping. So how do we group the kids? Sometimes we can use small group activities. Sometimes we use a large group activity. Who exactly we put in a group and what's the consideration we need to think about? We need to consider, some people use the buddy system, so have peer help with each other. And I know Mandy is going to talk about that in a few minutes. Assign jobs and tasks in the classroom, so everyone in the classroom have some responsibility and some role and a feeling of membership in what's going on in the classroom. And also, someone mentioned it before, thinking about how many kids in each center is going on, and then celebrate each child. Each child has a very unique characteristic and a lot to contribute to the classroom. So celebrate all the kids in the classroom and how they can contribute and how can access to other kids. And I know Courtney mentioned it before, the Autism Speak have a very, they publish, and we have it in the resource also, they publish paper or kind of a guide of how to include, and they have very specific example with scenarios and stuff, and I really recommend that you look at that. So now we're going to move on to the next defining feature of inclusion, which is participation, and Mandy will take it from here.
Great, thanks, Hedda. So once we've provided access to learning opportunities, then the next step is to allow the children to participate actively in those opportunities. And so when we're talking about participation, we're talking about specific practices that teachers can engage in to promote belonging and engagement within an activity. And we can do that by providing specific individualized supports, like the visual supports you saw in the previous video. We can also promote participation by following the child's lead. The greatest way to know what a child is interested in is to observe them, and then they will tell you, right? Either vocally or through their behaviors. So following their lead is going to help to create opportunities where they want to participate. And then the teacher can provide the supports necessary to help them to participate. We know that we can increase participation by using a variety of interesting and novel materials. I'm sure you all rotate out your materials to keep interest high, and so that's exactly what we would be doing to increase participation for all learners. And then, of course, this is what's been mentioned quite a bit in the chat box, but also is the use of choice. So choice increases motivation, decreases challenging behavior, and therefore leads to better participation. So the choice might be of what materials the child wants to engage with. So if everyone is building, do they want to use the wooden blocks or the colorful blocks? Also choice about how to engage with those materials. And one way you can ensure this is to make sure that the choices you're giving are not right or wrong ways to engage in those materials, but instead thinking about materials that can be used in a variety of ways. For example, different types of blocks, puzzles that have larger pieces, floor puzzles, sand and sensory materials don't have a right or a wrong way necessarily to build with those or to interact with those. So finding ways that children can participate at different levels with the same materials is one way to help promote participation in an inclusive setting. Also facilitating group work. So maybe there's some art materials that are open to all children and they can allow choice for how to use those materials or how to work together to create something new. So in this video, you're going to notice a child who has autism, and he's over on the left of your screen with a little tablet in front of him. And so since some children with autism may not have vocal speech, or perhaps the speech that they do have isn't intelligible to others who don't know that child really well, in these cases, we might want to use technology to help promote their communication. And so this technology or these tools are called augmentative and alternative communication. And that's often abbreviated as AAC. And so augmentative and alternative communication, or AAC, can include picture cards where the child selects the picture and exchanges it to an adult to communicate what they want, or exchanges it to a peer to communicate what they want. They can also use speech generating devices or apps where they select an icon and then the device actually produces the vocal speech. Students without language or with limited language can also use gestures to help augment what it is that they're saying, or even manual sign language. However, teachers have to be able to create those opportunities for the child to participate and communicate their thoughts, their ideas, their wants, and their needs. So for example, if you're leading circle time and you ask the children to go around and say their name during a welcome song, then you can pre-program a speech generating device so that when it comes to the child with autism, they can select the device and participate in that good morning song. So in this video, you're going to see the teacher incorporating opportunities for a child to use his speech generating communication device to participate in the activity. As you watch, make sure you notice what the teacher does to create those opportunities, and also look carefully at how she responds to the child who's communicating using the AAC device. So I do want to let you know that this little boy uses his device to request those musical sticks that are out in front of him, and then he uses the device to choose which song to sing. It's a little bit difficult to hear all the speech that's produced with the device, so I just wanted to draw your attention to those two things.
And we are playing with my friend Elijah today. Put them in his lap. Here, you can hand them to him. Great job! You have to let you get his sticks, and now we can all play together.
Okay, so in the chat box, if you'll just note, what are some of the strategies that you observed that teacher using to help create opportunities for the little boy to participate in that activity? What did you notice her doing? So she used some wait time, which is great. So oftentimes children with autism need a little more time to communicate what their wants and needs are. So using that expectant wait time of 3 to 10 seconds is great. So she gave him some opportunity to speak. She incorporated the peer, right? So she is actively promoting interaction between the child and his classmates. She's using a lot of praise, so really specific praise. So she's also repeating what he says with his speech generating device. So she's modeling that verbal language as well. You also see that she's got a visual support system in front of both children right there. So as they participate, they're earning circles, which I'm assuming will be able to be exchanged later on for something super fun. She's also making sure that as he requests with the speech generating device, that he actually accesses what it is that he's requesting. So if we want to teach appropriate communication, we want to, of course, be able to give the child what it is that they were asking for. She used some modeling. When he got stuck at one point towards the end of the video, she provided what's called a hand over hand prompt. So she physically helped him to select the item on his icon. Really great. And so this teacher is using choice opportunities where the child gets to choose the instruments. She's arranged the environment so that those instruments are clearly set up in an array to help the child scan what the choices are. She also is using materials that have a variety of ways that they can be engaged with. So the sticks could be tapped together, tapped on the floor, one stick, two sticks. The sticks could have been rubbed together back and forth. And so these are scaffolded materials where there's a lot of ways for people to participate at different points of access and ability. One of you noticed that, yes, there are only 2 children in this setup. So there may be some activities that are more conducive to smaller groups and some other ways to promote participation that might be more conducive to larger groups. When we're thinking about participation, we also want to think about what our expectations are for the child. So what are our expectations for their participation? And there's 3 main areas that we should consider when we're setting up those participation expectations. One is the child's developmental level. So what can the child do with respect to their cognition, their current language, their current social emotional skills, their current motor skills, and any other adaptive development that they may have at that point. We also want to think about the child's age. So what would be the expectations for a typical child of that same age? So if we're asking a child to sit for 20 minutes of circle time, is that a reasonable expectation for a typically developing child? And if it's not, then we want to make sure that we're setting a similar expectation that's appropriate for this child's age. And of course, we also want to think about the functional abilities of the child. So what can the child do independently? How can we leverage those strengths? And what does the child need some help with? And how can we build in supports ahead of time when they reach those points where they need some assistance? So as Hedda mentioned earlier, another valuable resource we have in our classrooms are peers. So one of the main results of inclusion is to develop friendships and feeling of belonging and of membership, which means that we can't just have back and forth interactions between the adult and a child with autism. We've got to systematically create opportunities for the child with autism to have positive interactions with his or her classmates as well. So peers are one of the most valuable resources for helping children with disabilities like autism participate in inclusive settings. But children need guidance in terms of how to approach, how to interact with their friends, and how to build those friendships with children with disabilities. So in this video, you're going to see a teacher creating an opportunity for peer support and peer interaction during outdoor water play. So again, with peers, it's not just about location, but it's about systematic instruction. So planning ahead to think about which peers might be good models and how might you create an opportunity where interaction is fun and motivating. So go ahead and watch this video. I want you to look at the little boy with the blue long sleeve shirt. He is the focused learner in this video, and look at how the teacher is leveraging peers in the classroom to help build some of those friendships and interaction skills.
This video clip shows Luke, a 3-year-old boy with language delays at school. His teacher is prompting a classmate to introduce Luke to a new water play activity.
Can you say, here, Luke, here's the ducky. Look, Luke. Look, Luke. Ava's giving you the ducky, Luke. Look. Say thank you. He said thank you, Ava. Luke. Luke. Ava, come get Luke to the water. Can you take Luke to the water? Don't drink it, Day-Day. Tell Luke, say, come on, Luke. Don't drink it. Come on, Luke. Go with Ava. Walk him through the water, Ava, so we can get wet. Walk him through. Go ahead. Watch out. You like it, Luke? Want to do it again? Ava, do it again. Take Luke back through. Edward, watch out. Step back some, Edward. Come on, step.
So what did you notice in that video? The teacher could have easily taken Luke and led him to the water, but instead she worked with peers to help promote some interaction. So what did you notice there? How could you take what you saw here and incorporate that into your own practice? So it's great that the peer is holding his hand and guiding him to the water. The child also communicated with manual signs. So he signed thank you, and the teacher helps to translate that for the other child. So she said, oh, he's saying thank you. So she's modeling and facilitating or bridging that social interaction. She provided some verbal guidance to the peers, yes. So peers need help in order to be peer supports, absolutely. Clear instructions for how to get him to participate, modeling. And then she stayed in close proximity, that's right. So we're not outsourcing our instruction to the other students in the class, but we're helping to create opportunities for them to interact and to develop some positive social and emotional skills. Really great. And so the last area that we're going to talk about with respect to inclusion, so we've talked about access and universal design for learning to promote access. We've talked about participation and creating opportunities for participation using choice, variety of materials, peer supports, and age and developmentally appropriate expectations. But now we're going to talk about how to provide specific supports within those activities or within our day or our family routines or our home routines. And so when we think about supports, we're also thinking about professional support. So professional development opportunities and continuing education opportunities for providers and also for families. What tools, strategies, new knowledge, or understandings do we need and do our families need so that we can all work together to promote positive outcomes for children with disabilities? And of course, this is individualized and has to be determined on a case-by-case basis. So step one is to get to learn about the families and learn about their support needs. So understanding what their daily successes are and where they may be experiencing some struggles. So you can also work with members of the child, if the child has a diagnosis and is receiving special education services, you can talk with members of their individualized family service plan team, or if they are above the age of 3 years old, with their individualized education plan team or their IEP team. And these other professionals can help you to facilitate conversations with families, to help understand what the needs of the families are, and then to use that to determine what supports a family may need. Maybe a parent needs training and communication strategies for their child. Maybe a family is feeling a little socially isolated and needs some help facilitating play dates with other children in the classroom. Or maybe there's daily routines such as toileting, mealtime, or bedtime that the family might need some support with. So as providers, you also may want to pursue supports so that you can best support children with disabilities in your program. So this might be attending webinars like this, but also collaborating and sharing resources with one another. So you all have tremendous expertise and materials, and so providing support to one another may help increase outcomes for the children you serve. In addition, you may want to seek some support from other professionals. So if you have a child who's using an augmentative and alternative communication, you may want to start to collaborate with their speech pathologist to think about ways that you can incorporate that AAC into ongoing classroom activities or routines. You may want to team up with physical or occupational therapists to help think about how to design your environment to promote access and participation. Or for children who are receiving behavioral therapy, you may want to talk with those providers as well to think about how you can adapt or incorporate some of those strategies within your learning environment. And of course, in order to have the time and the space to collaborate with these other professionals and with the family, you're going to need administrative support. And so supports can also be administrative in nature, such as coverage for your classroom so that you can have time to meet or to attend other trainings. Technology support so that you can connect with others without traveling, such as text apps or video conferencing. So, in other words, when we talk about supports for inclusion, we're not just talking about supports for the child, but we're talking about supports to create a space in which providers and families can access ongoing learning opportunities and collaboration opportunities. In this video, you'll see that this specialist is coming in to consult into a preschool classroom. And I want you to notice that instead of pulling the child out and working on oral motor skills or speech skills, this specialist is coming into the classroom and pushing in those supports. And when these supports are pushed in, this helps promote the child's belonging and membership in the classroom. They're not a visitor who comes and goes, but they are a member of the class. It also doesn't remove the child from his or her peers or for other learning opportunities that may be taking place. So in this video, this is during snack time where there's tons of language, motor, and social interaction opportunities. And so allowing the child to receive supports during those activities and routines is critical.
This video clip shows a little girl with multiple disabilities during mealtime at an early Head Start center. Watch how practitioners provide her with some additional support to help enjoy mealtime alongside her peers.
Your bib, we have to put on your bib. Good morning.
In your mouth. Anne, who's been working with Jaleesa, would come over once or twice a week and work with her. And they would give us tips and let us know what they're working on. For instance, they wanted to start using utensils. So then they talked with us, and as a team, we all started putting, a spoon in Jaleesa's hand and have, well, I remember we used applesauce. Be upside down and all over, but that's the next step, right?
Good using your spoon. Miss Carrie, help, huh? She needs to do it.
Her vision, she sees better on the sides to put her food on, on either side, and she sees it a lot better. From what I understand, she wasn't feeding herself. Well, she was doing some finger food type things, but she eats completely by herself here. I personally think that the other kids have a big part in that. She sees, them playing or doing something, and she imitates a lot better now. It's good.
So what did you notice about that video that you might be able to incorporate into your own practices? How could you leverage specialist support to help create more opportunities in participation and access in your own centers? So supporting the teacher is critical, absolutely. So in order to support the children, we have to support the families and the providers. Staying in the classroom to be able to observe some of those intensive or individualized supports to think about how you can incorporate those is awesome as well. Step by step, so talk about the good things and take baby steps, absolutely. Asking specialists to come into the classroom to provide their services is great as well. And then identifying those functional needs. So a specialist needs to know what the needs are in your classroom. So having that teaming and that collaboration is critical so that what they're working on is functional for the child as well. Awesome, really great. So I'm going to turn it over to Hedda to talk about one last section we have in terms of support.
Okay, thank you, Mandy. So we talked about inclusion, and we really focused on the child. We talked about access, participation, and support. But we also need to remember that inclusion is not just for the child, it's for the whole family. When we think about the child is part of a system, the family system. He's the center of the system, but everyone in the system, all the family members are impacted by whatever going on with the child, and the child is impacted by everything that's going on with the other members of the family. So thinking about the family as a system or as a unit, we really need to think about inclusion, not just from thinking about how can we provide access to the child, how can we support the child. We really need to think about the family as a unit and thinking how can we work with the family as a whole. This is specifically important for military families. So military family can be relocated, can have one parent deployed, might not have extended family around. So they might need support from providers, from teacher, to really feel included, know what's going on around, know what support available for them. So for military family as service provider, we really need to think about how can we learn about them? How can we understand what their needs are, and how can we support? But again, think about that as a unit. I know Mandy was talking about the different type of support, and I cannot control. Okay, sorry. So thinking about encouraging and empowering family, Mandy talked about providing access to specialized support, but again, military family might need some more support because they are new to the setting, new to the city, new to the country, new to wherever they are. They might not have the regular support they have around them. So we really need to think about what their needs are, what support, what specialized support they need. Thinking about sharing information with them in the community event, what's going on, how can they have access, how can we be flexible to make sure that they are supported and they are included in everything else that's going on. Modify event to promote access, participation, and support for children and caregivers. I know Mandy was talking about that, and promote learning and child development in the home. So I know one of you also mentioned that in one of your comments, that we really need to think about not just what's going on in the setting, in the early childhood setting, but what's also going on in the home, and how can we make the connection between what's going on in the home and what's going on in the setting. Maybe we can help parents work on some of the skills or use the same strategy in the home and what is used in the setting, in the early childhood setting. So make the partnership with the families and kind of the continuous of services and strategy across home and early childhood setting. So family have different experiences with inclusion. We know some of them have worries about inclusion and how their child will be able to access and learn within an environment that have other typically developing kids. They worry, they have hopes, they have challenges. So the next video, which is a little bit longer, it's a 3 minutes long video, we're going to see parents, and they're going to talk about their hopes, what they were worried about, what their experiences with the kids, but we're also going to see the early childhood environment, the inclusive environment, and really think about, when you watch the video, about the words the parents are using, what words are they using that help them have this experience, a positive experience, and perceive inclusion as effective and quality inclusion. Think about what strategy we can see in the environment. You're going to see a lot of things related to visual support, physical environment, accommodation about each kids. You can see them sitting in different ways and participating in different ways, the social environment. So I really want you to kind of look for this kind of thing we talked about throughout this webinar today, and kind of use the chat to write what you've seen related to the strategy we talked about, how parents, kind of the experiences they feel, and how we as provider can really help them have a positive experience. And then we'll have some more discussion after we watch the video. So again, it's about 3 minutes long.
I felt nervous, very nervous. I was with him full time, and then to hand him over is nerve-wracking.
It's mostly fear of the unknown. I didn't know how we would fare in a classroom setting with all those typically developing kids. and then how he would understand those instructions and those lessons that are being taught by the teachers.
You look at your environment differently, and how is the environment accessible to every child, and how is your environment set up so that every child is getting exactly what they need.
Our mission and vision statement are anchored in high expectations and outcomes for all students. So living that out at the early childhood level, that was the work.
I think it all starts with that IEP process. So really having that evaluation team and the current team writing those functional goals and objectives. My goal is that services such as speech, OT, PT, all those could be embedded right within the classroom and the routines that we have.
He's learning in class, he's engaged in class, he has relationships.
Before, we were like thinking maybe we're going to be there for the rest of our lives to support him with all the needs that he got. But we are so happy to see that he can really do the things that he can do right now. Those skills has developed so much. He can truly create something wonderful, and that really makes us very proud.
I think what we know now is that there are more questions than there are answers, and to be open to every opportunity that you are given to learn and to develop always what's in the best interest of the child, and to give them those opportunities to show you what they need and to listen to them.
It makes me really optimistic for his future. You know, I used to worry a lot about, would he fit in? Would he get picked on? How would his classroom environment be? But he has become quite the popular guy at school. So he comes into class and I can't even tell you how many kids hug him. He has true friendships, true relationships in class. And he brings a special just energy to his class. And it's positive for his classmates too, to see that.
I hope inclusion promotes awareness to those typically developing kids that there are other kids like our son that need support as they try to learn their way through life.
There's a softness there, there's an empathy there that I see in his peers. So we didn't expect that, but we love it.
Any thoughts, any reaction, any reflection? Any activities or strategy you've seen, stuff we talked about? So the team focus on helping engagement and kind of promoting development. Parent recognizing success. This is very important, right? Again, thinking about not just the child's success, but we want the parents to feel success. Parents' input is highly valuable, yes. So, and we need to be involving them from the first day to ask them about the child and the family and make sure we embed all of that. Yes, it is touching. And it's a longer video and you'll have the complete link so you can see the whole thing. Embedding specialized support. And it's not just embedding the specialized support, it's embedding also the IP and IFSP goals and objective. So inclusion can really promote all of that. We don't have to just take the child out and work with them on what they need to be needed. We can work with them in the inclusive environment. Trial and error, yes. Again, we do everything we can as a UDL, Universal Design for Learning. We try to plan ahead and we try to create an environment, physical and social environment that promote membership of all the kids and the families, but we will need to do some individual adaptation based on each child. Yeah, teacher. And I think one thing that one of the fathers said, he said awareness. It's increased awareness, inclusion. When he started, he said we were worried about the unknown. So not knowing what to expect and how to expect, and then felt more belonging. And then he knew what's going on and kind of thinking about awareness, not just from the teacher and the other kids, but also the community as a whole. So some of the strategy that were kind of we saw in the video, and some of you mentioned, is the visual. There are a lot of visuals, and again, it's not just for kids with disability or with autism. It's for everyone. I'm looking at other giving parents voice, empowering parents. And again, inclusion is for everyone. It's not just for the kids with autism. And it's something that both Mandy and I emphasize, it's not a place. It's not a placement. It's a lot of other things that make a person feel a member of the environment and have access to everything else. Yeah, the empathy of the children, the mom at the end was talking about that.
So Hedda, can I just jump in real quick? So as a parent who has a child with a disability, and some of you in the audience may indeed also be parents who have children with disabilities, the thing I noticed and loved about this video was a lot of what you all are saying, and I saw it best when Alex's comment, parents are able to feel optimistic about the future. And if you've had a child with a disability, especially when they are an infant, right? And you're given this diagnosis and these doctors tell you things. There's a shift for some of us in the dreams that you have for your child. And sometimes those dreams kind of disappear and you're not sure what those dreams are going to look like now because it's a new trajectory. And what I hear in this video are parents who feel as though some of those dreams have been given back to them. Or that the professionals like you all have helped them kind of shape and design what those new dreams look like. And that's really important work that you all are doing. And I think for me as a parent sitting on that side of it, in that video, that's what I see. And so I wanted to kind of share that as another perspective, but also to encourage the work that you all are doing in the audience, because it was nothing was more special to me than when I felt like somebody had really helped me put kind of new dreams in place for my child. So I share that as an encouragement to you all to say also thank you for the work you're doing, but also to just kind of really frame it in that kind of context of dreams.
Thank you, Robin. So yeah, I see a lot of comments, and please continue to, and I think it is very emotional to look at that and see how dreams can change and kind of and how effective or quality inclusion can really look like, and how it could impact not just the child with a disability, but the peers, the family, and the community in large. So I think it's important to think about that. So kind of final thoughts about what we talked about today. We talked about inclusion. And we said that inclusion is when all are valued, are members, and feel that they are part of what's going on. We talked about the defining feature of effective and quality inclusions. We are access, participation, and support. We also talked about the fact that we don't just look at the child. We need to look at the family as a unit and also think about the benefits for everyone else that included, the kids with the typically developing kids, the teacher. We also mentioned a few of the barriers that we have, and some of you, I think Stephanie kind of mentioned that in one of her comments, and she said, "What do I do if I don't have enough support?" And I think that's a big barrier and challenge to inclusion. We need to have another pair of hands who can help with different things, with doing the hand over hand support. We need to have other support. We need to have OT and PT and SLP come into the setting and help with different things. But I think overall, we have the research and we have the personal experience of parents of the impact of inclusion. And that's kind of something, and the vision that Robin just talked about, and how kind of shaping the dreams of families and kids. And so we have kind of a very positive goals, and we have a lot of work to do in order to make sure that we have an effective and quality inclusion, but it's possible. And we hope that some of the strategy we discussed today will be kind of helpful when people continue with all the great work that we're doing here, that you're doing with the kids. If there's no other messages, or other comments or other, I don't see any other question. If you feel free, I know Robin is going to continue talking about CUs and stuff, but feel free to continue writing comments, and Mandy and I can comment about that. And before I kind of transition back to Robin, just thank you again. This is the final webinar we had in these 4 webinars on autism, and I enjoyed it very much. So Robin, it's all yours now.
Great, thank you. Mandy, I don't know if there's any last words you wanted to jump in before I kind of start the housekeeping piece. If so, feel free. I'll give you just a second.
No, thanks, Robin.
Okay, thank you. So one thing I wanted to point out before I really start housekeeping pieces here is that on the event page that you all, that website, that 30366 website we've posted multiple times, at the bottom under event materials, there's PDFs of resources and slides, but also we did a series of blogs, audio and video blogs related to inclusion of young children with disabilities in a variety of settings. And those 3 links are provided under the event materials at that 30366 webpage. And we'll post that link again multiple times in the next few moments. But those might be interesting resources for you to kind of listen to and or watch related to a variety of different contexts. So I wanted to just kind of point out that those are there, as well as the PDF of the inclusion toolkit that Hedda had mentioned earlier. So as we now begin to wrap up, I want to first, of course, say a huge thank you to Hedda and Mandy for a wonderful session today. And I also want to specifically thank Hedda for all of her leadership throughout this series this year. It has been just a privilege to work with everyone that I've had an opportunity to work with. And I'm just very, very grateful for their work. And I also want to thank you all in the audience for your participation and your engagement. A lot of these webinars would be far less enjoyable and informational without your participation and engagement. So we're very appreciative of that as well. The Military Families Learning Network is active on social media and has many ways that you can connect with us via Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Links to those are going to be posted in the chat pod, and they are also on the slides when you, if you were to download them. Some of you may be able to click on the icons there on the screen as well. So before I explain how to obtain the CE credits, because it's kind of, a little nuanced, so listen carefully. But before I do that, if you are a BCBA here today seeking CE credit from the Behavior Analyst Credential Board, I again need you to verify your attendance by typing your name in the chat box at this time. Again, I only need BCBAs who need to verify their attendance for those specific BCBA credits to type their name in the chat box here at this time. So all webinar participants seeking any type of continuing education credit or a certificate of completion will need to take an evaluation and post-test. This is a 2-step process where you will first take an evaluation to provide us with feedback on today's webinar experience. And then you will then get a little message in your window that says you'll be directed to click to another link that'll take you to a post-test where you'll see multiple choice or true-false questions about today's content. Upon passing the post-test at 80% or better, a certificate will be automatically emailed to you within 24 to 48 hours. Please note, though, that some providers, email providers, will direct those certificates to your spam folder. So if you don't receive it within a few days after you've taken both pieces, the evaluation and the post-test, please check your spam folder. If it's not there, you can email us at that email address that's on the screen, mflnfd early intervention at gmail. It's also been posted in the chat. So during this entire series, we have offered a variety of CE credits that are listed there on the screen. And for additional details on those credits, you can visit the website, that 30366 website. At this time, please listen carefully so that you can know where to go to get the credits. So, Board Certified Behavior Analysts seeking CE credits from the Behavior Analyst Certification Board must meet specific requirements as detailed on the screen. They must have attended the live webinar, logged in as an individual participant, and passed the post-test within 24 hours of the live event, and provide their BACB certification number when asked on the post-test. BCBAs can obtain both state early intervention credits and BACB credits through one evaluation and post-test. Participants who are seeking only state early intervention credits, which also then serves as a certificate of completion, must have attended the live webinar or viewed the recording and passed the post-test within 1 year following the event. Participants seeking credit in Michigan or Wyoming must provide a credential certification number when asked on the post-test. Further, Wyoming participants must have attended or viewed all webinars in the series and submit all 4 certificates in order to receive credit. For Wyoming, no partial credit will be recognized by the Wyoming Professional Teaching Standards Board. As indicated before, certificates will be automatically emailed to participants upon successful completion of the evaluation and post-test. A copy of the post-test questions and your answers will be included in the email. Any other materials you might need in addition to the certificate, such as a copy of the slides or handouts, those are available on that event page, which is, again, that website 30366. So, a link to the webinar event page is being placed in the chat and is available on the screen. When you go to that web page, you will see 2 purple buttons like the ones you see on the screen now. You'll access the correct evaluation and post-test by using the button that applies to you. One is for BCBAs, which includes an option for state credits, and the second is for those who are not BCBAs but are seeking credits for their state or a certificate of completion. Both buttons will be on the webinar event page immediately following this webinar and will look like those that you see on the screen. If you don't happen to see them, just keep scrolling. I promise you they're there. Now, this is our final webinar of 2019, and I'm both saddened, but I'm excited about 2020. 2019 has been great, and we're so thankful. 2020 is going to be a whole new series. All children can engage in challenging behavior, and strategies exist that can prevent challenging behavior and promote skill development. But not all strategies will work for all children. Children with disabilities may need unique supports that their peers without disabilities do not need. Similarly, children who've experienced trauma may also require different strategies used in unique ways in order to be effective. So coming in 2020, the MFLN FDEI series will focus on prevention and intervention strategies related to challenging behavior in young children. This webinar series will provide participants with practical tips and ideas that can be easily implemented in their work. Some of the topics covered during the series will be multi-tiered system of supports to manage challenging behavior, environmental arrangement to support positive behavior, building relationships with families around challenging behavior, and supporting friendships and building community amongst peers. You can follow us on Twitter or Facebook or keep your eyes open for more information after the holidays. And if you're not on social media, be sure to check the website for the latest updates. As I wrap, if you have any questions regarding today's presentation or CE credits, please feel free to connect with us on Facebook or Twitter or send an email to mflnfd@gmail.com. And again, thank you all for being here, and thank you to Hedda and Mandy. We hope that everyone has a wonderful holiday season, and we will see you in 2020.
Thanks so much. I just wanted to echo Robin's thanks to Hedda and to Mandy for the incredible wealth of knowledge that you've provided today, as well as to everyone who joined us in the chat pod for conversations, for questions, and for hellos. We'll stay on for just another couple more minutes here in the room. However, I do want to provide a friendly reminder that all of the resources that were mentioned today, along with the slides, as well as a recording of today's webinar, are available on the event page. All of the resources are currently up. The recording will be available for review and for sharing here in the next couple of business days if you wish to go back, watch it again, or share with anyone who may be interested. As always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us via email, either at the one that Robin provided to you at our central MFLN Gmail address. We wish you a wonderful rest of the year, and we look forward to seeing everyone again in 2020 for some more incredible learning opportunities. Thanks again for joining us. We hope you have a great day.